everyone, this is The Big Fight and I'm Maria Shakil. A judge is in the dock after a pile of unaccounted cash was found at his home. The controversy surrounding Delhi High Court Judge Justice Yashwant Varma broke during Holi last week when a blaze at his Delhi bungalow had to be put out by firefighters who then found the cash. Now the judge has been transferred, which the top court has clarified is not related to the probe that has been initiated in the cash incident. The issue has caused an uproar from the legal circles to the parliament. At least 55 MPs raised the issue with the Rajya Sabha chairman, who raised the concern that the issue did not come to the light immediately. He wondered what would have happened if it involved a politician or a common citizen and not a judge. Several legal eagles have raised serious concerns over the handling of this issue, with some like Harish Salve demanding that there should be a proper system to deal with the allegations on judges, as the opaque collegium system is no good enough. Does this case give the impression that the judges are above law? Is corruption in judiciary the elephant in the room which needs to be talked about now? Is it time to talk about the transparency and accountability of the judicial system? And has the judicial immunity gone too far? And the big question, who will judge the judges? Which body is competent to probe the judges? Is the collegium system under cloud? To talk about all these larger issues, we have a stellar panel of top legal eagles and legal minds of the country tonight. First up is former Solicitor General Harish Salve. We have a senior counsel, Harish Salve, joining us on NDTV. Mr. Salve, really appreciate your time. What does the recovery of the large sums of cash from a sitting Delhi High Court judge's residence really indicate about the state of judicial accountability in India?
I was proceeding on the assumption that there was a recovery. I believe the Delhi fire chief has now said that there was no recovery. And it's now rather a very odd situation in which, on the one hand, it says the Supreme Court has transferred him, the Supreme Court Collegium has issued transfer orders, the Supreme Court has ordered an in-house inquiry. On the other hand, they say there is no recovery. If there is no recovery, what's the inquiry about? I don't know what's going on, because if such a serious allegation is being falsely made, then it raises very serious questions. And if it has been, and if the allegation is true, then again it raises very serious questions.
And Mr. Salve, just minutes ago, there was a press note that was issued by the Supreme Court where they said that the transfer of this judge, Justice Varma, is not related to this incident, and that there is a lot of misinformation and rumors being spread about the case. The Supreme Court press note also says that the Delhi High Court Chief Justice will give a report today.
Well, if normally the transfers are with some reasons or some purposes, and if the judges say it is not for this reason, or it is for some other reason, we wait and hear what they have to say. Because the whole thing has become very, very murky now. If there was indeed such a recovery, and we were all proceeding on the footing there was such a recovery because of what was suggested, i.e. that the Supreme Court has ordered a transfer and the Supreme Court is considering a probe. And I was of the view that if this is true, if the transfer is for this reason, then the transfer is not the right way out. And that was the whole debate. Now, if the Supreme Court says, no, his transfer was for some other reason, which now raises further questions, I think this situation is getting far more controversial and far more concerning than it was earlier. As it is, it was devastating, but now it's becoming worse.
Do you think there are several unanswered questions? And where do you think, Mr. Salve, the answers lie, in the sense that who really has the answer? Do you think it's the cops who were present before the fire men arrived on the scene of this incident? Or do you think that there is much more than what meets the eye now because of multiple versions coming out?
So what I feel, if the Delhi fire chief says he did not have any recovery, then I think the Supreme Court should have an inquiry immediately on whether there was indeed a recovery, in which case it raises one set of questions, including why the fire chief said this. And if there was no recovery, then who are the people who have manufactured these allegations? And why have these allegations been made?
Absolutely.
And I think in my personal view, in either event, his transfer should now be put on hold. Because if he was being transferred, not because of this, but for other administrative reasons, and the way the two issues have got joined at the hip, if the allegations against him is false, it's very unfair to him to transfer him. And if the allegations are true, then it is too little to transfer him.
And Mr. Salve, because before the details emerged in the last 1 hour, many saw that simple transfer isn't really the right investigation, because had this been a case of a non-judge or an ordinary citizen, he wouldn't have really managed to investigate escape investigating agencies if cash of this nature was recovered from his home.
You're absolutely right. I said this on Republic TV in the afternoon. I said this on Times now before this contradiction had come. And I don't know, this news came in the morning in the newspaper. I wish that the fire chief had issued the statement at 7 o'clock in the morning, not 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What has been going on all day is everybody is proceeding on the basis that the newspapers have it right. And there are some photographs which have been published. God knows if those photographs are AI generated. God knows if those photographs are actually of the event. So this has now become a far more serious matter, and my conviction now is reinforced that we need a system which can deal with these kind of allegations. The collegium in-house system is unequal to the task. Look at what has happened today. The collegium chose today to announce the judge's transfer on the same day on which you get a newspaper report saying that cash has been found at the judge's house. Now, if the newspapers had it today and there is some conversation of this kind, I find it hard to believe that the judges had not heard that such a thing is happening. But if they had, their first reaction in the morning should have been entirely different. So today, unfortunately, what has happened, and maybe it's possible that the collegium has transferred him for reasons completely unrelated. Look at the newspaper report. The newspaper says that some members of the collegium were not happy with the transfer and thought something more was required. This is the problem of having an in-house opaque system. The people of this country are extremely concerned over allegations that of a very respected, otherwise a very respected judge of the High Court, or very senior judge of the High Court, suddenly you wake up. I was shocked in the morning to read that the cash has been found at Justice Varma's house. I couldn't believe it. But then comes the news that he has been transferred. And then comes the newspaper report saying that some of the members of the collegium, etc., this is true. I would have hoped that at 9 o'clock, the Supreme Court registry could have said, this is a nonsense. The transfer has nothing to do with this. The next news which comes out is that the Supreme Court is ordering an inquiry. So that reinforces the point that there is some truth to these allegations.
And
then comes the DCP saying, no, but nothing was recovered. I think this was exactly my point. We need a proper investigation. And I'm not saying this needs to be investigated outside the control of the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court should seriously consider whether they should have a panel of a judge and maybe one or two eminent outsiders to conduct this inquiry. Because I do not want, if the police chief is right, if the fire chief is right, and these are false allegations, we don't want the people to feel that the judges have helped one of their own.
Yes.
There should be credibility to his exoneration.
What should the Supreme Court do at the moment? Because the clarification has come from two departments already, including the Supreme Court, which has said what I told you a few minutes back, Mr. Salve, steps that is needed to restore public trust and confidence in the Indian judiciary, the institution.
Well, fortunately, I'm not the Chief Justice, and at my age, I'm too old to be a judge. So I can say this. I would feel, considering all that has happened, his order of transfer should be put on abeyance, because whether we like it or not, because of the newspaper reports and the collocation of events, the allegations of cash recovery and the allegations of transfer have got joined at the hip. We need to put his transfer on abeyance, because if the allegations are false, different consequences follow. If the allegations are true, transfer is not an answer. I think the Supreme Court has constituted a committee. The Supreme Court has ordered an in-house inquiry. They should have a thorough inquiry done. I would personally feel the inquiry should be with judges and one or two eminent outsiders. And after the inquiry is done, if he is exonerated, then there has to be a full-scale investigation into who planted these allegations. And if he is not exonerated, the law must follow.
Mr. Salve, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for sharing all your thoughts with NDTV. And joining me now is Mahesh Jethmalani, Senior Supreme Court Advocate. Mr. Jethmalani, of course, you know, this is a debate which began today. The entire incident of pile of unaccounted cash being recovered from the residence of Justice Varma has raised a lot of questions. But should stricter mechanisms be in place to investigate corruption within the judiciary? This has also reignited debates if sitting judges should be subjected to CBI or Lokpal investigations.
There's a misconception, right? In Veeraswamy's case, right, if a judge was, found involved in a case of corruption or bribery, right, or disproportionate assets, right, the investigating agency, an FIR could be lodged, right? The investigating agency, as per Veeraswamy's judgment, would have to seek the sanction of the Chief Justice of India to whether, if it was a constitutional court judge, right, High Court or Supreme Court, to continue with the investigation and then file a charge sheet. So that's the law laid down, right? This in-house procedure, right, is something which happens in cases where it's reported to the CJI before it's got into the hands of the police. Right? But sometimes an FIR is filed with the police, and then if the police think it's not a frivolous case, then the Veeraswamy course will be taken by the police. In this case, the situation is slightly different. It seems to have been reported to the Chief Justice of India, and then the collegium decided to do whatever they did. I don't know. Right now, there are so many corrigendums issued by the Supreme Court, right? Or at least one corrigendum I know of, thanks to you, right? Which suggests that I don't even know, was money in fact seized, because what we were told initially was that the transfer was because of that in fact we were told there was a division in the paper report suggested that there was a division in the collegium. A transfer was ordered, right? But there were some members, or at least more than one member, or maybe just one member, who as per the news report said that stricter action should be taken than just a mere transfer. And about this fire officer thing, I would, the Supreme Court has taken some action, right? Now, we should await the final report, since there seems to be some clarification issued by the Supreme Court. But I would not take the statement of a fire officer, right? Because in the first place, we don't know how the seizure of this money came to the Supreme Court's knowledge, right? Whether the fire officer had anything to do with it, we don't know. All we know is that there's a fire officer. That's what we've been told. And I don't think that's not been put out by the Supreme Court. There's a separate story which says that a fire officer who doused the fire said that no money was seized while he was dousing the fire. That's all.
Mr. Jethmalani, is there any other option between the transfer and impeachment? Any other available remedy for the judiciary to send a message of impartiality and accountability?
Well, look, the most noble cause for a judge, if there's cash seized from his house, which is unaccounted for and appears to be illegally in his possession, right, is resignation. It would save everything else, right? Then whether the court wants to or anybody wants to, but there are a lot of issues arising out of this. How was this money seized? How much money was seized, right? Was it accumulation in more than one case, or was it just a one case situation? If it was related to a particular list for giving, these are all speculative questions, and it doesn't behove me to speculate to that extent about a judge who was otherwise considered to be a very fine judge. But the question that will emerge because obviously something has happened. Some drastic action was taken by the Supreme Court, notwithstanding the subsequent clarification. Right? Now we are told that he was transferred in the normal course or for reasons because he was the ninth most senior judge and all that. But if this money was indeed seized from his house, then these questions will arise because the public needs to know what was the quantum involved, right? And was it related to a judgment in a particular case? That's all. Or cases.
Yes, and there are allegations of favoritism and corruption which have been there in judicial appointment. The larger collegium system has faced multiple questions in the past. Then you have the NJAC, which was struck down by the Supreme Court on the grounds of judicial independence. With these controversies resurfacing, and this one perhaps really, one would say, a shocker, do you think the NJAC would have perhaps ensured better checks and balances? Mr. Jethmalani?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you leave the issue of corruption within an institution to the apex body of that institution itself, there tends to be instinctively, right? A sort of institutional bias in the sense that the apex body, it's a brotherhood, right? They know these judges, sometimes judges make mistakes, they get all, so it probably requires that you should have the judiciary involved in the procedure of deciding whether to take strict action or not. But there should also be some people externally from outside the judiciary involved in this decision-making process.
All right.
I'm not talking about necessarily an overseeing ombudsman over the judiciary, right? That to me seems to be too drastic a measure. But I think the judiciary should, in this process, involve outsiders, right, who are completely free from any possible latent bias regarding the person concerned.
All right, Mr. Mahesh Jethmalani, thank you so much for joining us here on NDTV. And joining me now is a former Additional Solicitor General of India, Vikas Singh. Mr. Singh, my question, of course, emanates from the developments that have happened today, and it is very, very disturbing because it raises the larger question of absence of mechanisms, perhaps. Do you think there is need to ensure accountability without executive interferences? Because Judicial Oversight Commission was talked about. Perhaps there is a need for an oversight commission which can help in tackling corruption and misconduct?
So actually, this oversight procedure which is in place is basically to protect the members of the higher judiciary from vexatious and completely frivolous complaints. So it's not to give any kind of cloak of immunity from any wrongdoing. It's only the initiation can't happen before this process is done. Once this initiation happens, once the prima facie evidence comes before the collegium, thereafter the law will have to take its own course, and thereafter it will not be the in-house procedure anymore. So in-house procedure is only as a check on the members of the judiciary. And I think rightly so, because there could be large number of cases where people could be, framed up, or if there is a judgment which you deliver against the executive, there could be cases where things could be planted. So all that has to be seen before a go-ahead is given. And I think this check is necessary to ensure, and that is why even the Lokpal, decision is being examined as to whether Lokpal, who is supposed to be a authority to look into corruption only, whether he can also independently examine cases, notwithstanding the in-house procedure. And for that, the Supreme Court is open. They have also appointed an amicus. They will decide that question. And maybe with the current, scenario, they may ultimately agree that these matters can go to the Lokpal as well.
Yes, because it's a developing story with regards to that cash which was recovered from a judge's residence. Of course, there is a reaction which has come from the fire chief as well. The Supreme Court issued a press release too. There are controversial judgments and there are corruption allegations, which is actually eroding public trust in the judiciary. How can judiciary then give up, generate that impression that the milords, that they can be seen to be conducting investigations or ensuring that these allegations of corruption are not really brushed under the carpet?
So two things, Maria. Firstly, this case should be taken as a test case, and this case, the judiciary should show that they believe in zero tolerance on corruption. So that's number one. Number two, the corruption that is there in the judiciary, there is high time that there was a process of identification of black sheep in the system, and those be weeded out from the system. Now that can happen quite easily, because if you see, we are all aware that there are brokers and there are peddlers, justice delivery peddlers going around in the market. So if the justice delivery peddlers are to be, caught, then some are actually bogus peddlers who are just making money out of judges without the judges even knowing, and some are actually doing peddling. So once they are caught and they are, taken into custody, they will, wherever there is a actual, peddling happening, they'll be able to trace the case to the judge, and those judges will also have to be dealt with very sternly. Because I think if we don't do this now, the credibility of the institution is at stake, and that will really, really harm the overall functioning of the judiciary and the people's faith in the functioning of the judiciary. And it's a very crucial moment for us. The other course correction which I feel needs to happen is to also rethink or reinvent the collegium system and make it more transparent and ensure that people with credibility, people with integrity, people with merit only are appointed. Because what is happening, and which is very sad, that they are appointing only people whom they know or who appear before them, rather than looking at the basket of all the good names in that particular category. According to me, a good judge needs to be requested to become a judge, because he will give up his lucrative practice to become a judge, and he'll be actually doing public service.
That's right.
But if somebody is lobbying to become a judge, that should, according to me, be a disqualification. And that is how the judiciary needs to reinvent itself on the collegium system as well.
Okay, my last question to you. After NJAC was struck down, the entire issue of judicial appointment continues to be under the scanner. There will be more spotlight after this incident. Can it really stop at a transfer of a judge here? Because, and what about criminal investigation?
So transfer is actually no solution at all. Transfer can't be an answer to what has been found in the residence of the judge. Transfer is actually putting the dust under the carpet. You actually need to ask him to not do any judicial work, which is what they did in the Bombay High Court. If you remember, 4 judges were not given any judicial work and they were asked to resign. The Bar Association also passed a resolution there, and ultimately they had to resign. Justice Bhattacharya, and there were 4 judges, I don't remember all the names. So they had to resign. So that is how this has to be looked at. If he doesn't resign, then judicial work still should not be given to him. And probably the impeachment process should be initiated. Although it's sad that the impeachment process has never resulted in an actual impeachment in this country since independence. But probably sometime it'll have to be taken, to its logical end. And the political dispensation also may ultimately rethink on this whole process and decide to do an impeachment. So and the moment he resigns, his protection goes away, and then the law will set in course. And then, if whatever CBI or ED or whatever who has to step in will be easily able to step in. And thereafter, he'll be like a normal, accused, like any other accused, and face the trial, whatever normal people face.
All right, Mr. Vikas Singh, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of The Big Fight. As we said, it's a developing story. There are multiple versions which are coming out in the public domain, but it's only getting murkier by every hour. A story we'll continue to track very, very closely here on NDTV. That's all from me on this edition of The Big Fight. Thanks so much for watching.